Hi, this is Julie with a quick note to let you know about a new resource on the website called the Mother's Quest Marketplace, where I've curated a collection of my favorite courses, products, books, and more, all created by Mother's Quest members or podcast guests. From Lindsay Pera's Journey to Right Livelihood, which you'll hear more about in this episode, to my own recently published book, The Mother's Quest Inspiration Guide, I hope you'll find something on the Marketplace page that will light the way on your epic life journey. Visit mothersquest.com/marketplace to take a peek. Now, on to the show. Hi, and welcome to Mother's Quest, a podcast for moms like me ready to live our own truly epic life. I'm Julie Neal, a life and leadership coach, community builder, writer, and mom to two high-energy boys who challenge me to grow into my best self. I'll be right there. Where was I? Hello, and welcome to a special episode with a woman who's been an incredible source of wisdom, support, and guidance in my life. A mentor and teacher who has helped me claim the mystic in me, Lindsay Pera. Lindsay and I connected in a magical way at a group dinner in San Francisco about 4 years ago. Though she was seated at the other end of a long table, she came up to me before the evening ended to say, "I have this feeling I'm supposed to talk with you." We had a delightful conversation and parted ways, but several months later, when my youngest son Jacob received a Lyme disease diagnosis, I searched in one of my Facebook groups for someone who had experience with the disease, and Lindsay's name popped up again and again. I reached out to her for guidance, and after an almost 2-hour phone conversation, I learned about how she discovered she had chronic Lyme disease and had passed it along in utero to 2 of her children. I hung up with tremendous admiration for her motherhood journey, a plan of action to navigate Jacob's care, and also knowing that Lindsay would become a trusted resource in my life. Blending strategy honed from her career as an analyst at Accenture with her intuition as founder of a new paradigm business called the Modern Mystics Institute, Lindsay is a source of inspiration and guidance for so many others like me. We all benefit from transformational courses she's created, like the Journey to Right Livelihood, which you'll hear more about, her books, The Mystic's Path and The Mystic's Almanac, the tarot card deck she created with her partner, Sarah Love, and her membership community, the Mystics Society. Another woman who Lindsay has impacted in powerful ways is Mother's Quest member Selina Davis, who brings us this episode's dedication.
Hi, I'm Selina Davis, and I'm honored to dedicate this episode of Mother's Quest podcast to Lindsay Pera, my friendtor. What is a friendtor? Well, that is a friend and a mentor wrapped all up in one. Over the years, Lindsay has helped me learn how to gather all the things that I know and all the things that I do to create a right livelihood. Lindsay even introduced me to Julie as a mystic, and that was an introduction because Lindsay knew that about our similar path in disability and special needs parenting. So what does that look like, right livelihood? Well, my right livelihood, let's be honest, I'm a person of multifaceted lifestyle. So my right livelihood has become a place where I learned to create a business that included blogging and podcasting, as well as becoming a special education advocate and having a practice in advocacy, life coaching, and management consulting. I have an emerging community called Spectrum Mother, and without Lindsay's tutelage in right livelihood, as well as in divine timing mastery, I would have never recognized how to gather and to align myself in that work, as well as my lifestyle as a mom to a special needs child who is neurodivergent. Putting everything together is an amazing feat, in my opinion. So I want to thank Lindsay, as well as Julie, for allowing me to share this dedication. I am always reminded to live an epic life and to claim my right livelihood with these two powerhouses. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Selina, for that beautiful dedication and for expressing all the ways that you are stepping into your right livelihood while being an incredible mother and grandmother. This idea that we can care for ourselves and the children in our lives, even through significant health and developmental challenges, and do work we love, blending all the parts of who we are, stepping into our leadership and legacy, and finding magic and gratitude along the way is something Lindsay demonstrates herself and illuminates for all of us in this conversation. From her decision to move her family to a multi-generational homestead and creating the Modern Mystics Institute, to how she's navigated having chronic Lyme and now long-haul COVID. This discussion is a beautiful weaving of all the ways Lindsay slows down in her life to manifest and then notice what she's grateful for, even when things are difficult. Her gratitude practice that she started in a spark moment when she found beauty in the sunset during one of her darkest days begins its 11th year of 365 days, just as this episode is being shared. I was so grateful for this time with Lindsay. I hope you'll find time to slow down and listen to this beautiful conversation so you can find strands of what Lindsay shares that are meant for you and that help you weave some new magic and new meaning in your epic life. I'm Julie Neal, and this is Mother's Quest. Lindsay, welcome to the Mother's Quest podcast. I am so thrilled and honored to have this time with you. I've been looking forward to it really for weeks. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're going to start with the question I ask every guest on the podcast. And I know that this will be a deeply meaningful and bittersweet question for you because you lost your mom 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about your childhood and the impact that your mother had in shaping who you are.
Well, I actually was raised by 3 mamas. So that's the first thing that's kind of unique. I had a sacred trinity of mamas raising me. My biological mom, her name is Sally Dudley, was early feminist and kind of like the movie Hidden Figures. If any of your listeners have watched that movie, she was a liberal arts math major actually out of Vassar in upstate New York, who was recruited out to the West Coast to work on mainframe computers. And so she worked in defense initially, but then quickly segued to IBM and then to Hewlett Packard. And she spent her working years of her career moving her way up to being one of the top women in Hewlett Packard and really modeled for me what it was to be on path and on purpose and really following her own inner drumbeat to what was meaningful to her and ways that she could contribute to the world. So she was a powerful and beautiful model for that. I was also raised in blended families. So both my parents divorced when I was 2 and remarried by the time I was 4 to their long, long time life partners. In fact, when my mom passed 3 years ago, she passed on the day of her 40th wedding anniversary. So her second chapter, her second marriage was her life partner, which is beautiful. But my dad also remarried and married his college sweetheart after he and my mom divorced. And my stepmother, was a kindergarten teacher who worked hard to establish a Waldorf classroom in her public school, Palo Alto school. So it was almost like having a charter classroom. And so a lot of Waldorf was woven into that household in terms of probably my early love for nature, connection for tactile and sensory experiences, for beauty way, and for ritual and celebration. So I think that was an important piece of my journey with my stepmom. But I was also raised in the home by a woman named Marva Els. She's a Panamanian woman who was my mom, my biological mom's right-hand woman, who was really the one who did a lot of the daily ins and outs of our household. And so I think it's really important as I've moved through my own family constellation work and own biology work to really look at my maternal influences through that lens of the sacred trinity, because Marva played such an important role in my day-to-day kind of domestic life. My mom played such an important role in terms of modeling empowerment and sovereignty and career choices. And my stepmother really also played a huge role in activating a lot of my desired experiences that persist to this day about what it is to bridge walk between very real modern technology-based world, but also tradition and beauty way and nature.
I absolutely love this. So often when I talk about Mother's Quest as a community, I make sure to say that it is a community for all people who mother.
Right.
And mothering can look so differently. And you don't need to be a biological mother to be nurturing and caring and helping a young person grow and become who they are. So thank you for making this so transparent. I think that many of us have maternal influences and people who have shaped us, but might not name who they are and how they've impacted us. And the naming and bringing to light what is always there, but maybe not named or visible is one of your gifts. So I'm not surprised that you started off immediately going there. I'm certain that that is going to be a thread that we weave together through this whole conversation.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
The next question I want to ask you, I talk a lot about a spark moment, which are these moments that many of us have in our lives, which become a catalyst where it almost feels like time is slowing down and something within us shifts. And often it's a perspective that shifts. And I've had many of those moments, but one in particular, which I talk a lot about when I had the two birds that were trapped in my house, which I know you've heard that story. I know that you had a deeply impactful spark moment during a time when you were battling chronic illness. Tell us that story and a little bit about the ongoing impact that that spark moment has had on your quest.
Sure. Well, I'll take a little step back to actually a spark moment that preceded the one that you're referencing. So I was a French literature major in college. I had no idea what that would translate into in terms of profession and my work in the world. But I quickly found my way working in management consulting in San Francisco for a large management consulting firm. Just after it split from Arthur Andersen, it became Accenture. And I certainly had a lot in my DNA that was highly aligned to a high-paced downtown financial district management consulting life. But I also had all of these other receptor sites in me, underdeveloped and really seeking meaning, seeking a different way. Already, even at that time, kind of looking at what we were being faced with in terms of climate and in terms of capitalism and in terms of the role technology was taking in our lives. And I was, use a phrase we use a lot in my mystic world, I was bridge walking a lot, feeling like I had one foot in the world of this very real, context of business strategy and software development and technology, working in Silicon Valley and with my roots being so connected to a Packard and early tech company. And the other foot in this world that always a very inner deep level knew there was something more, something else that I was supposed to be doing. And that inner knowing kind of got suppressed for many years until it started to percolate up in the form of this internal voice that was literally saying, "This is killing you," every time I walked out the door to work. And I would dismiss it. It sounded like this dramatic voice in my head. And then it was one of those things you just step aside or move beyond. And obviously it seemed like something that wasn't serving. So, you just push beyond that. But ultimately, like any inner voice, by ignoring it, it just continued to get louder and louder until it actually began to manifest itself in the form of actual illness, dis-ease in my body. And so ultimately, my first spark moment was realizing that I couldn't ignore that inner voice any longer. I couldn't ignore the impact that my case and my lifestyle and my work choices were having, not only on my family and my young child at that time, but on my body. And I became one of those people who had the kind of spark moment, the epiphany to take the grand leap. And that grand leap led me to retire from the corporate world at the age of 32, to move down to the central coast of California and to move on to a 40-acre multi-generational homestead where our vision was to live much more connected to the earth and raise chickens and goats and raise our children in a different way. And that really set me on a path for reclaiming a lot of those latent components of my truth and myself, for activating those receptor sites that were so hungry and so desperate for more truth and more meaning and a more aligned experience. But ultimately, again, with that term bridge walking, what emerged within me was it wasn't the release of my former life that I thought it was going to be. I had this vision I was never going back to something. But as I journeyed forward into the next chapter of my life, what I actually realized it was a reclamation of the components of those pieces that while I thought I was leaving them behind, I was actually claiming them in a new way. I was releasing the pieces that didn't serve and allowing to grow and to take deeper root the pieces that did serve. I learned that I have a deep passion for supporting heart-centered businesses, educational nonprofits, businesses that are looking beyond the bottom line, what we now call new paradigm business. And that in order to do that in a good way, I had to do it on my terms. I had to do it from a place that didn't compromise my health, that wasn't extractive to the people or the planet or to the idea of having a purpose, and that those things could actually coexist. So I was very much on the path to this more integrated second professional phase. I felt very aligned to myself in my health. I felt very aligned to myself as a woman and a wife and a homesteader and a mother, and increasingly aligned in my ability to serve from that place for organizations and consulting clients that felt really aligned to me. When I found out that I was expecting my third child, it's a whole other long story, but we had had a lot of challenges conceiving. I had had 6 miscarriages, and those losses occurred between my first and my second child. We've been told we couldn't have more children. So we really saw our second as a complete miracle out of the blue, and had completely taken by surprise when 4 years after my second was born that we found out we were expecting my third. But my health deteriorated quickly during that pregnancy, and it impacted my ability to work, of course, but also my ability to just get out of bed, to show up for my 2 children, my husband, myself. Then my daughter, my youngest, was born with severe neurological impacts that for quite a while were undiagnosed and mysterious, and led us on a journey that ultimately took us to all the best pediatric hospitals you can imagine, and feeling somewhat failed by mainstream medicine until one day we were sitting in the office of a pediatric Chinese medicine practice. And goodness, I think it was in Menlo Park, when that practitioner for the first time kind of dialed the microscope back and said, Lindsay, back in the day, you had these health issues that led you to leave the Bay Area. Your other 2 children have kind of had these things that you've managed, and now your third has been born with these severe impacts. Because, I feel like there's something systemic going on. Could be environmental, I'm not sure. But he was the first one to do an infectious disease panel across all of us. And what we found out was that I had been dealing with chronic Lyme disease all the way back to my corporate days. And I had unknowingly passed it in utero to my second and third children, to my daughters. And the cumulative effect of those years of chronic illness, and then the stress of this third pregnancy and the stress of having a very ill infant, ultimately meant almost a complete collapse of my health in tandem with my newborn. And so we continued to seek resources and support around the state for how to support each of us in our own way. But there was one moment in particular that really stands out as a spark moment, and the one you're referring to. We were actually driving up. We're in the middle of a health crisis with my youngest, and we were driving up to Stanford to see yet another specialist. And we were about halfway up the drive from the Central Coast, and I was just feeling completely defeated, just utter surrender moment where I was ready to just give up on it all, jump off, be done, unplug, whatever metaphor applies for just literally, I couldn't do it anymore. And the sun was starting to set over the Santa Cruz Mountains off on the left as we drove up north. And it just took my breath away for a moment. And in that moment, it took my mind off the pain in my own body, the pain I was feeling on behalf of my child and my children on various forms of treatment for Lyme disease at that point, the existential pain of how I had created this potentially or hadn't been caught sooner. I mean, all of the things, all of the burdens that I was carrying in that moment lifted looking at that sunset. And I realized that what I was feeling was this moment, this splash, this spark, to use your word, of gratitude. And so I pulled out my little phone. I think I had a flip phone at that point, And I just took a picture of the sun setting, this grainy little picture out the windshield of our car as my husband was driving. And I ended up posting it to an account that I had on Facebook, rarely used, no profile picture, but I was just guided to write the words 365 days of gratitude, day one. Because what I knew in that moment was that something cellular had happened to me in accessing gratitude of that sunset that night. And that if I could just identify a single moment each day like that, an authentic integration of gratitude, that I could string those moments together and each would help me make it through that day and then potentially the next. And what was born from that spark was a gratitude practice that became quite public in that it was expressed daily via Facebook as a visible expression and gesture, really, to that commitment of accessing genuine gratitude each day. I'm now going into my 11th year, and it has literally been a daily touchstone for me that has grown in so many ways and delivered so many miracles. We found complete remission for several years from our health experiences. I found my way into founding my own software company and then ultimately my own boutique consultancy that allows me to show up each and every day from the integrated space of being an intuitive business strategist, fully owning all of my experience and my gifts for business strategy and business development, while also insisting that we not abdicate our magical selves, our health, our relationships, the things that we identify as mattering most to us. So many, many miracles delivered themselves through this phase of cultivating a gratitude practice over all of these years. And that was even tested during this time of COVID. As part of my mystic world, I also publish an annual publication called the Mystic's Almanac, similar to the concept of the Farmer's Almanac, where we tap into the energies of the year coming ahead and we seek to help support our readers and our followers and my clients in understanding how they can align to the factors at play at a given time, whether those are social factors, economic factors, health factors. So of course we had a little glimpse that something big was coming. I certainly didn't know it was going to be a global pandemic, but as those themes emerged, we were quite aware that they were going to have a tremendous impact on so many of our social constructs. Again, health, economic, social, all of these things. And yet I had no idea that that was also going to mean that COVID was going to land on my doorstep. On Friday the 13th in March, my son was returned home. Everyone was released from his college campus. And like all of the other students, he was in Santa Barbara at the time. He came home and within 2 days, he had a fever and a sore throat and the telltale beginning signs of COVID. This was long before there was access to public testing. And then within 2 hours of his first fever, his college age girlfriend also had a fever and came to our house to quarantine. And then within 2 days, I had full blown COVID and then my 2 daughters as well. So we started on the COVID journey really early, and it had a huge impact on us as people who have had underlying health conditions, have had autoimmune impacts, have had quite a journey with our health systems. So it's very much been a process of calibration and navigating those challenges since that time, although I would say we're finally emerging from it. So I guess I have to say that there were kind of those 3 sparks for me. The initial awareness that my health and my intellect both needed equal seat at the table in order to find my purpose and to walk this path that I'm meant to walk. That gratitude was going to be a salvation for myself and others that I could help guide to it through all of life's ups and downs. And then the spark that really came through COVID, which caused me to reassess and begin to discern really everything in my life and draw upon the tools and the resources, the experts, the expertise, and the experience that we had gathered through all of those years of chronic illness to apply them to the new challenge of COVID, not just the health challenges, but also the economic challenges and the social challenges that were also very at play during these times.
Thank you for sharing all of that. in many interviews, I have moments where I'm like, I know I'm going to go back and listen again. I feel like there was so many layers and so much that you just shared about these 3 spark moments. And thank you for tying them up so beautifully with the big takeaways. First of all, I'm so glad that you're doing better and your family is doing better. I want to thank you and acknowledge you for stepping into your purpose and your path, because I'm just one of so many who have benefited from you listening to your voice. And I'm also so inspired daily by your gratitude practice. I think so many of us look forward to your post each day. Like, oh, what photo is Lindsay going to share? What insight will you offer? What thing that maybe we're not paying attention to will you slow down to notice? And I think it invites us all to do that, even if we're not posting our photos and sharing what we're grateful for each day. So thank you for your commitment and your willingness that one day to follow your instinct and share what you were noticing.
Thank you for that reflection. Yes, I'm so grateful for it all and appreciate your witness.
I'm taking notes today on a binder that I have, and I picked it because the image on the front spoke to me. It's the image of a staircase in a spiral. And I also have your book, The Mystic's Path, in front of me, and it has a spiral. And I'm thinking about your story about being in the midst of chronic illness and then needing to find your way through that, and how you then found yourself in some ways back again with COVID. And what I love about the image of the spiral, and I talk to my teenager about this a lot when he's feeling like, I thought I had figured this thing out, or I thought I had moved past this, and he's faced with it again. And also for myself, when I have those moments, is that our life's journey really does happen in a spiral. And it's not that we will never come back to a similar challenge again, but when we come back to it, we're on the next ring of the spiral, and we have so much more knowledge and insight, and we've expanded in who we are, that we don't approach that challenge again in the same way. So before we move to delving into the epic eye pose, I just love to know, as you found yourself in maybe a similar place again on your spiral, what was different for you this time?
Such a great question. I feel like so much of what contributes to us feeling defeated or depressed about the challenges in life are rooted in this idea that we're on a linear journey, that there's a before and an after. And if somehow you're encountering something that is a challenge from the past, that somehow it's a quote unquote step back or a failure or a fallback or a return to. And I think that this idea of shifting your mindset from this linear time space continuum of unfolding of a human life into one that's a nautilus really does afford you the grace and permission to access compassion for yourself and others in entirely new ways. That rather than thinking you wouldn't encounter something again, that you should almost anticipate encountering themes that include recurring highlights, but also recurring challenges at many different phases of your life. And so it's like a welcoming of an old friend, even if it can be a challenging friend. Chronic illness is certainly not something that I would have intentionally designed into my life, but it absolutely has also delivered me to more meaning, more truth, more depth, to powerful connections, to relationships that I might not have had otherwise, to deep learning and application of my skills. I was a French lit major in college, but a lot of my coursework actually, I went to Revelle at UC San Diego, was in science and biological science. And so I've always had this side of me that's very interested in not only the natural rhythms, but our biological rhythms. And so as chronic illness shows itself again, I have this opportunity to greet it in a new way, to take an inventory and to assess, who are you now? And who am I now? And how will we be in right relationship with each other? I don't try to dominate or dismiss the illnesses that my family faces, but instead understand what learning and what healing they're seeking to bring forward within us as individuals, but also as a unit. And coming into right relationship is a mutually beneficial thing if you do it from that place of co-creation and not look at it through the lens of it being adversarial. And I know that that's challenging for people, and it can be triggering to those in the chronic illness community to hear language like that around illness. People often feel like they're shaming, like somehow they manifested their illness or they did something wrong. That's not what I'm saying at all. In fact, quite the opposite. There are so many challenges in life that come our way that I just want to say this to your listeners, that you didn't deserve and that you did nothing wrong to have come your way, and that you're not doing anything wrong to have persist in your life. But where you hold the wand, where you hold your own empowerment is in how you greet them and how you learn together and how you walk together. And if you can shift your thinking to being this walking on the Nautilus rather than walking on the line, what you'll notice is every single turn of the Nautilus, or even visualize it as walking an actual labyrinth or medicine wheel, if you've ever had the opportunity to do that, you are quite literally not the same person with every turn of the wheel. You have taken new breaths. You have had new thoughts. You've gained new perspective. The light has shifted. The energy around you has shifted. The clouds have moved ahead, and all of those ingredients in some grand cosmic recipe produce the opportunity for a different result. So I really do look at kind of a mystical side of chronic illness as being, what our indigenous elders, leaders, and wisdom keepers would call the shamanic healing crisis, which is the side of adversity that actually brings healing and powerful portals to healing that we might not have accessed otherwise. So that was kind of a long-winded response to your inquiry. But yeah, whether you look at it through the lens of kind of full circle moments, or whether the imagery of the Nautilus resonates for you, or the Escher staircase spiral, it's all an aspect of remembering that we can grant ourselves permission to be kind to ourselves as we journey around the wheel through every season, through every year, and through every challenge that we face.
Everything you say is so beautiful. I'm taking lots of notes. I'm like, each of these ideas, these concepts are so rich, like a cosmic recipe, and the remembering, and it is one of your gifts. Just the way that you are able to express these things. It's so beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I could spend more time here because that sparked a lot of questions for me, but I want to make sure we delve into the Epic guideposts. And I'm hoping maybe some of my questions will weave in through these.
Sure.
So Epic, as you know, it's a metaphor for us, as you would say, holding the wand of our own lives, or the pen, becoming our own authors of our journey, saying yes to those voices inside that are calling us to something greater. And it's also an acronym mnemonic for the guideposts that I think help us to live that kind of life when we're raising our children. So I want to ask you about the first guidepost, E, which is about engaging mindfully with our children. And we may need to move through these a little bit more quickly. So I'll ask you to share, what is one or two key nuggets or tenets that you have found on your Nautilus that help you to engage mindfully with your three amazing children?
Really, everything in my world has been centered around that question. For me, that's an inner ring lightning rod of what meaning we were seeking as parents with our children, to be able to be present and aware and create the conditions for engaging mindfully. So absolutely, my leap to finding the place that felt most aligned for us to raise our children was a piece in that. Choosing to be a low technology household, or being very discerning about the gifts of technology, but also when and how to use them. We had the incredible blessing of building our own home at a relatively young age, one that was non-toxic and earth-friendly, but its entire design was around engaging with our children. Small bedrooms, but centered around a great room that allowed for different spaces for art or music or sharing meals together. Really staying focused on coming together at a family meal where we come together with gratitude first, creating time for seasonal rituals, celebrating and being present to the moon cycles together. We pay attention to the new moon and the full moon, and we use those opportunities to engage with our children and what intentions they're holding and what visions and dreams they're pursuing, but also what they're releasing, what they're ready to let go of. So honestly, that is such a big question for me, because it probably sits at the very center of my entire goal and wish for how I get to journey in this lifetime with my children.
So beautiful. One of the things that I did I've been part of your mastermind and then your journey to write Livelihood and Divine Mastery courses over many years now. And I always love to ask you to define these terms. So I've done Journey to Write Livelihood in September. I think it'll be at least my third year. And every time I feel like I take in like a new layer of understanding about it. But I'd love to ask you, because you mentioned your rings, that your children are at the center of your rings. Can you give us a quick definition of what that means?
Absolutely. Let me just give a little shout out back to you. You have played such an incredible role in our new paradigm community, the Mystic Society, and doing what you are doing right now in this sacred time together on your podcast. You have asked these questions. You too slow things down and help to kind of discern and untangle language and story and metaphor. So I just want to thank you. You've brought such a gift to our world with your invitation to become more conscious and define what terms like weaving or co-creation or mysticism or manifestation mean. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Yeah. In terms of rings, I think the easiest way to integrate that concept is to think of what we already know about the rings of a tree. Well, we know that as a tree grows through its seasons and phases, trees produce rings from the inner ring to the outer ring. That if you were to look at those rings in a cross section at the end of life of a tree, that those rings show you so much about its journey. It can reveal times of infestation. It can reveal times of drought. It can reveal times of strength and rapid growth. But we as humans also essentially can visualize our life and aspects of our life wheel, or the aspects of what's important to us in life, through this lens of what is your innermost ring, meaning almost like the taproot of that tree, all the way to your outer ring, which might be your creative endeavors or the projects that you bring into form, all the way to the branches and the fruit that they produce, the ripples that work or that creation returns to you and to your family and to your community, the legacy that you create. So when I say something is inner ring, it's kind of like that most sacred taproot. And then as we move out from there, we have all the other beautiful rings and flavors and nuances of our life. But I do use the framework that is really drawn from indigenous wisdom around the world, cultural touch points from around the world, based in the medicine wheel, based in the life wheel, that have you looking at yourself and your world and what's important to you through this lens of what are the spokes on my wheel, thinking about how all the different things form a constellation and all play a role in who you are. So the spokes on your wheel might be your health, your well-being, but also your key relationships, your children, your partner, your work, your creative endeavors. Those are all examples of spokes on your wheel. And then we have the opportunity to take those spokes on the wheel and create concentric rings, place them in rings that support one another and nourish each other, just like the rings of a tree, where we draw up nourishment through the center rings, and then we can produce and give back through the outer ring. It's kind of a little visual metaphor you can lean on when you're thinking about what your own wheel and rings look like.
And somehow in all these years, I had not heard you, or maybe I didn't take in the metaphor about the rings of a tree. So I'm grateful that I asked the question again, completely demonstrating how helpful it is to slow down and really pay attention to these things. I posted in the Mother's Quest Facebook group that I was interviewing you today and asked what questions do people have for you. And Laura Halpin, who I know you know well and work closely with, who's part of the Inclusive Life community with Nicole Lee, who's such an amazing partner with you. Her question relates to something you just said. So I feel like this is the time to bring it forward. She really finds herself grappling with the possibility of appropriating mystical traditions from Indigenous people. And how do you walk that line to being able to honor and use these tools, but not appropriate them? I'm not saying it in exactly her words, but it was something to that effect.
It's such an important question. And thank you so much for bringing Laura into this, sending so much love out to her. It's an important question for all of us to be holding in our consciousness as we're learning and as we're moving along our own life journey, what we like to call the mystic path, when you're thinking about the ways in which you integrate what's meaningful to you, what's spiritual to you, and how you then bring that forward in your very real lives with your colleagues, your family, your clients, whoever it might be. It's also a long conversation, but the short of it is I tend to look to the words of the elders and the wisdom keepers about how to think about learning traditions and applying them in modern times. And most of the elders and wisdom keepers that I have had the blessing to experience their teachings or to be guided by or mentored by have had a similar approach to one another around this question of appropriation. And that is seek, please seek, and learn, please learn. And yes, please apply to your life, your circumstances. Use these tools or technologies or practices or traditions in ways that work in your world and create meaning and beauty and healing and connection, but do so from a place of reverence, not from a place of costuming, not from a place of capitalizing or extracting, from a place of reverence. And one of the most important ways that you can show reverence for these practices is to only use them if you have been gifted them and taught how to use them. And when you use them, speak their lineage, speak where they came from, speak how they came to you. When we talk about the life wheel and you hear me saying these come from indigenous peoples around the world, that's part of speaking the lineage. When you hear me talk about the way in which we use cultural touch points and peacemaking, I'll often speak about John Young and the Eight Shields Institute, maybe even his mentors, Tom Brown or Stalking Wolf or Gilbert Walking Bull. I'll speak the names of the teachers, of the wisdom keepers. People will sometimes ask me, is it okay to use smudge? And I have to say, that's not a blanket answer. It's a case by case basis. I know part of the reason that I use smudge in my traditions, in my work, in my ceremonies is because I was taught how to use them. I was gifted the technology and I was guided to speak the lineage. So when we light the cedar and sage, I'll speak of Gilbert Walking Bull. I'll talk about the ways that he taught me to use smudge to clear and to protect. And I'll offer his wisdom forward, not from a place of appropriation or not from a place where it could be mistaken that this is something that came from me, but instead that this is something that I'm seeking to create ripples of and to create a lineage and a legacy that can persist in modern times. I really do caution people around costuming, around really using discernment of when and why you might post something on social media. Pause to ensure that there's an appropriate level of gratitude, reverence, and an ability to speak the lineage, where it came from, how it came to you, and how you're using it for good.
Yeah. Thank you, Laura, for that amazing
Thank you,
question.
Laura.
Yeah, so important. So the next guidepost P stands for pursuing your passionate and purposeful impact. I feel like this ties so much also to the work of Journey to Right Livelihood, which is this amazing course and community experience that you offer each year and that will be beginning in September. What do you feel like are the biggest lessons learned or things you like to teach that help us to step into our impact?
Oh, beautiful. Well, part of why you see the connection between this question and Journey to Right Livelihood is because you're familiar with the pillars of right livelihood. So this concept of right livelihoods, and here we are speaking the lineage, is one that's not new to us. It exists in cultures around the world. One of the most common places that you hear reference to right livelihood is in the Buddhist tradition or in the Japanese flower of life. And it's this idea that there's a reason that you're on the planet. And not just that, there's a reason you're on the planet right now in the time that you're here. And that's true for every soul that incarnates. That there's a reason that they're here and there's a path that they're on. And right livelihood, essentially, Journey to Right Livelihood really looks at it through the lens of three pillars. We look at it first through the pillar of a person's soul purpose and path, really tracking the cues and clues of what you're here to do, what your zone of genius is, how you make an impact, what feels most aligned to you. The second pillar is this concept of sacred commerce, which would have us reclaiming the sacred nature of exchange that predates the type of late stage capitalism that we're operating in now, far back, all the way back to the time of the merchant priest and the merchant priestess, this idea that exchange actually is a sacred practice that helped us step into peacemaking, where it wasn't just might is right or dominance based extraction. And instead we could create meaningful exchange. So sacred commerce is, how do we bring those concepts of meaningful exchange back into our work, into our client relationships, into our professions, whatever that might be. And then the third pillar of right livelihood is our leadership and legacy. So when you ask about that purposeful legacy, those ripples that we create, that's that third pillar of right livelihood. And for me, I really believe I was put on this planet, well, obviously for so many of the things we've already touched on, illuminating magic and meaning in life, walking a path of gratitude in the mystic's path. But ultimately, there's a really important component that has to do with shifting resources into the hands of the change makers. I believe I spent my time in management consulting and in the very real traditional corporate world to learn skills about how to cultivate wealth, how to grow a business, how to create impact. And it is my mission to bring those same skills, expertise, and resources to the healers, to the artists, to the change makers, to the new paradigm entrepreneurs and business leaders and nonprofits. So Journey to Right Livelihood and the Mystic's Path and the Mystic Society are three ways that I've done that. And ultimately, that is the ripple that I hope to make, is empowering people with these tools so that they could remember their own purpose. They could access a form of exchange and economic paradigm that looks beyond the bottom line to people, planet, and purpose. And that in so doing, they themselves are creating their own legacy of good as well.
Yeah, so amazing. The pillars really resonate with me. I am now thinking of another question offered in my group from Kristen Downs, who was with
Kristen.
us through Journey to Life
Yes.
last year. And I know it was transformational for her. This was her question that relates to your impact. In the times of a worldwide pandemic and climate change and social and political unrest, how do we both stay on our mystic paths and also continue to light the way? And then she said she was particularly interested in the climate change part because you live so close to where there are wildfires and because your partner in life, your husband, is a fireman, affectionately called the fireman in all of your posts.
Yeah. That's a big question, Kristen. Thank you for bringing it forward. The odd thing about it is here you're rattling off these really real, very challenging circumstances that we're all facing as a human collective. And yet, as you're reading them, I'm actually feeling this heart swell, then grew up into a smile emerging on my face because, Kristen, your finger is right on the pulse. I believe, however, that through right livelihood, we really claim the truth and reclaim the remembering or the knowing that we came in for these times, that this isn't an unexpected circumstance dropping in on all of us, that exactly the skills, the insights, the medicine in your medicine bag or the tools in your toolkit that you hold are exactly the ones that we need to navigate humanity through these times. I believe that more than ever, we are moving into a paradigm that is looking beyond simply the tactical, the practical, the strategic, into a time where the empaths, the sensitives, the intuitives, their skills will be needed more than ever. And that true discernment of our right relationship to the planet going forward will come from the integration of intuition and intellect. And so we're actually bringing forward for the first time kind of part 2 to the Mystic's Path in 2022, which is called the Intuitive's Way, Intuitive Arts. And it's seeking to do exactly that, take their bridge walking to the next level to support people in creating a true inner knowing of how to proceed in these times of not just crisis, but of collapse, cataclysmic collapse. And a lot of, we talk about the 3 transformational levers in the Mystic's Almanac, but those levers are your health and well-being, society or relationships, and then abundance and prosperity. So we're talking health, society, and economy all impacted. And I truly believe that this is the time of the mystic. This is the time of the sensitives. This is the incredible waves of children that have come in recent decades with highly sensitive natures, with a lens on the world that's been different than any generation before it, with a clarity of justice and purpose. I believe all of this is actually evidence of the opportunity that we have to not only face these crises together in a unified manner, but to dismantle the paradigms that landed us here, to dismantle the toxic systems that have held too many people down and served too few. I feel hopeful that even through this collapse, we are actually writing more aligned future and more just future going forward.
So in your answer, I'm hearing so much about trusting ourselves. There's that quote, like, we are the ones we've been waiting for, that is coming to mind. And I think it's a nice bridge to the next guidepost, which stands for invest in ourselves. And this is the guidepost that is about our health and well-being. It is about nurturing ourselves and creating opportunities for the things that bring us joy and pursuing learning. What would be your biggest nugget about how you've learned to invest in yourself?
Oh, my goodness. I think that this entire conversation actually illuminates insight onto this important component of the Epic Life Manifesto. And imagine what would happen to the oak tree if you cut its taproot. The tree would die. And yet we operate from this lens all the time that somehow you're supposed to be serving all your outer rings, your branches, the fruit, the flowers, the bees before you tend to that taproot. And the honest truth is there is only the world that you are living in and only the life experience that you're having if you are here to have it. And the only way to be here to have it in the most aligned and genuine and authentic fashion is to place yourself at the center of your rings. So while I say my children are at the center of my rings, when I say this is an inner ring thing, you'll hear my language bounce around. The truth is you have to be the center ring. You are the taproot. And so prioritizing yourself isn't some woo-woo facet of work-life balance or whatever, self-care, whatever the term du jour is. It is a critical life-giving function of you serving anyone or anything else in your life. So if I could implore you to do one thing, it would be to place yourself as the inner ring, to see yourself and your health and well-being as the taproot to that tree, and to prioritize your health from that place. It is truly the only place from which we can serve others.
I love that metaphor again through this lens. I guess one thing that's coming to me that I want to make sure to highlight, which I know would be aligned with you, is that when we put ourselves at the center of the ring, it's not only so that we can serve our children or others, that we matter and our own becoming the fullest version of ourselves. It's one of the things we are obviously here to do, like the most important thing we're here to do.
Well, and that they're not an either or. It's not the idea that you matter so that other things could matter or other things matter more than you. When you really step into this knowing that you are your life wheel and that you are the concentric rings of your tree, you realize that they're not mutually exclusive. They're mutually beneficial. And so it absolutely is true that you matter, but it also, you have to matter in order to create, to pursue passion, to experience pleasure, to identify magic. You are here to be on this journey that you're on with all its highs and lows, and you are equipped to do so. I truly believe that.
The last guidepost, C, stands for connected to a strong support network, so that we realize we don't have to be on this journey alone. You are such a beautiful community builder, and you have so many deep and incredible relationships that enrich your life. What do you think has been the biggest lesson you've learned related to this guidepost?
Connection for me ultimately is probably one of the most important words for what we have the opportunity to take away from our time in this life, in our bodies, in this existence. Connection to ourselves, first and foremost, connection to the things that matter most to us, connection to the magic of a sunrise and a sunset, connection to gratitude. I have been meditating a lot recently on the continuum that exists between this concept of being alone and the idea of us all being connected. And you notice that even within the spelling of the word alone, we also have the sounds and the letters of all one. It's as though alone and all one actually sit together in some great cosmic loop. And we are guided to calibrate ourselves between the alone time and the sovereignty we need, and also the connection. But ultimately, I use an acronym to guide me in really paying attention and cultivating awareness around this question of connection. And that acronym is YOU. And the first one is to yourself. Start first and foremost with cultivating connection to yourself, whether that's through meditation or walks in nature or journaling or whatever it might be. Really develop strong, healthy connections to yourself. The O is connection with others. For me, that's come through entrepreneur circles, through the deep nature connection circle, through like-minded families, through the amazing social justice and sacred activism warriors and heroines that I walk with. Seeking that resonance is seeking connection. And then the U in YOU is also seek connection with the universe. That's different than the religious models we were raised to believe that spirituality comes through. Seeking connection to the universe can mean pausing to take in the magical, limitless sight of stars at night, or my favorite phase of the moon, the eyelash moon, as it waxes from the new moon, whatever it is that brings you into the wonder and magic of the broader cosmos that we live in. If you can use the YOU acronym, it can guide you into deeper connection that produces results kind of beyond our wildest imagination. To use that cliche, I really believe that's true.
Well, I love a good acronym. So I'm now fully embracing you as
Yes.
a companion to the Epic IFOC. Thank you so much for illuminating that for us. Well, we are at the end of our time, sadly. And the way that we close up two things. First, I invite you to give me or anybody listening some kind of a challenge or invitation that you think can help us to more fully live our epic lives.
Well, I actually would like to use the words that you spoke into this sacred container earlier in our time together, slowing down to notice. There's so much that medicine holds, so much medicine within that practice of slowing down. And as we face these challenges that we're going to be facing together as a human collective, I think one of the most important tools that we don't want to overlook is the power in slowing down to discern, slowing down to assess, slowing down to help bring along those who may not be able to move as quickly or as resourced as some of us are able to. And if possible, in that slowing down, if you might also open up the space for yourself to identify where you are feeling gratitude. So that's different than thinking about gratitude or performatively speaking what you're grateful for, but it means actually do a scan of what are your cells feeling grateful for in this moment. Because if you can actually identify that embodied, integrated source of gratitude, what you're doing is you're actually creating a resonance of that type of gratitude, and it invites more of those conditions for which we can be grateful. So the challenge would be next time you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed or losing hope, despondent about all of the challenges that you're facing or that we're facing or that the world is facing, instead of just closing your eyes and barreling through, what would it be to actually slow down almost into micro movements so that you can really allow yourself to see, to feel, to hear, to experience, and to discern your next aligned step forward from that place.
Amazing. Thank you. I'll invite some reflection around this in the Mother's Quest Facebook group where I know you're a member, and look forward to noticing what comes up for us when we do that.
Beautiful.
So now we're at the closing acknowledgements, and I'm actually going to start with another something that someone in the Mother's Quest Facebook group shared. It's from Helgi Maki. And when I said, do you have a question for Lindsay? She said, yes, please ask her, do you know how much we love you? I do feel like that is a fitting lead-in for my acknowledgement to you, because I could acknowledge you right now for all the incredible insights and all the things that you shared. There are too many, even I feel, to encapsulate in this closing acknowledgement. The thing I want to most say to you, and try not to cry, it really is about how much we love you. There are, I think that many of us look to guides or mentors, and especially in the online entrepreneurial world, that we feel like show up in a way that we might want to pattern ourselves after.
Mm.
I never use that word pattern, but that's what came up just now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so grateful for you as an example of somebody who is authentic, deeply loving, so committed to your own growth and to your family, but also committed to making an impact in the world and doing that in a way that's rooted in justice. I always feel like you're willing to learn and look inside yourself and make adjustments and changes, and that you don't have it all figured out. But you do this all with so much grace and so much compassion and such an open heart. And it's truly unique. And I'm very grateful that our paths magically connected so that I could experience all of who you are in the world.
Thank you. It's such a mutual blessing. I'm so grateful for you and for our overlapping communities. I was activated to this concept of leading from the circle by one of my former partners and mystic sisters, Elena Lipson, this idea that we lead shoulder to shoulder, not in a hierarchical model. So I learn every day from everyone that I'm in contact with, and I'm so grateful, and I feel so blessed for each and every one of you. Thank you so much for that beautiful reflection.
And is there any new insight or something that is feeling like we shined light on from this conversation today that you want to name as we close?
Oh, such a good question. Actually, it's going to feel a little bit like a out of left field one, but really, there's always such magic and such power when you reference the two birds in your house. And that's always been true for me from the first moment you spoke your story. I knew that I was just honored and excited and thrilled to be on the journey with you, and your ability to slow down and to take note and to identify the magic and the metaphor and the mystery and what could be dismissed as everyday events or even non sequitur events. But I want to offer that reflection back to you in gratitude that I hope you keep telling the story. Please keep telling the story. It's so activating and so powerful, and I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Would you share some words to close us out, either a wish or maybe a favorite passage of yours from your book or in your teaching?
Sure. Actually, what I feel called to do in this moment is to close our time together energetically, the way that we do when we're in circle together in the Mystic Society, or when we come together on retreat, or even in strategic consulting sessions. I just like to invite people to come back to their body at the end of a time like this. Maybe even touch yourself on your heart or your belly or your thigh, ground yourself down. And then if it feels good to you, go ahead and give a little shake or a shimmy, and just use this as an opportunity to signal to your body, to your cells, that you can now release anything that we may have stirred up that isn't for you. Just go ahead and release it from your body, shake it on down. Energetically, you can just release it, almost like water pouring out of a hose back to the earth. Mother Nature, the earth, knows exactly how to transmute those energies back into pure life force for you. And then if it feels good to you after you conclude that little shimmy or shake, what Claire Hayes and Finhorn would call the shuggle, we can actually turn our hands up to the sky like little cups, if that feels good to you. And that's a gesture that signals receiving only those pieces that are meant for you, that serve you. Maybe something Julie said, maybe something I said, something in our weaving, some nugget that you're taking away. Your hands cupped in this gesture just signal that you're receiving that for yourself. And then from that place, we can go ahead and separate ourselves from the time that we had together, the unity that we created during this chat. We can release ourselves so we can go forward and laugh our own laughs and dream our own dreams and walk our own epic paths and lives, knowing we can tap back into this basket whenever and however we desire. I offer that you be well guided, well protected, and well blessed. And so it is. Amen. Blessed be, and aho.
Thank you so much for coming along with me on this episode of the Mother's Quest podcast. I hope this conversation sparked something that will help you live your epic life. If you'd like to get show notes and learn more about how to join the Mother's Quest community, visit mothersquest.com. And while you're there, I would love it if you would follow the prompts to subscribe, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, and help us to spread the word. I want to end with some words to help light the way on your quest. Seize the day, love your people, honor your gifts. Until next time.